All right, so in this video, what we are going to do is we are going to cover NextJS14 server components and how that differs from using server actions, and also how that differs from using routes. And so we'll, at some point, we'll demonstrate all of those, but we're going to focus on server components right now. So what you notice is I've already gotten started here. If you want to learn how to get started with your NextJS14 app, the link is in the description as well as right over here. So go ahead and check that out, and it'll show you how to get started with your NextJS14. So now that we're here, what I have is this is the landing page, which is very simple, and it's got a get started button. When it says when we click on get started, we want this to take us to our app itself. So what we're going to do, if you're not familiar, to create routing, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a route by creating a folder, and we're going to call this server. We're going to use countries server. All right, and this will make sense because what we're going to do is we're going to use the free API to access all the countries in the world and get their information. So that's what we'll do. And in here, what we're going to do is we're going to create a file. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Create a file called page.tsx. Let's create our component, and we'll name this countries main component. So let's call it countries server component. All right, so then we're going to fire it up. We're going to link it up so it is countries server. Again, for those of you guys who are new to NextJS14, the folder name is the route, right? And then the page.tsx is going to be the default page that's going to be rendered. So let's go ahead and click save. And if I click on here, it should take us to our country server component. Now you can see right over here, it says country server component. Awesome. So now we have something we can work with here. Now, what I want to demonstrate to you is that by default, NextJS, the components are server components. So if we put console.log hello world over here, and we click save, and if I go ahead and refresh, actually I already refreshed automatically, you'll see that hello world is actually consoled in our server, not in our browser, because we are running on a server. If we change this to the use client directive, so basically we're turning the component into a client component. Let's go ahead and save it. Hear that? It's refreshing. What you'll notice is now it is consoling it to our browser. So that is the difference between our server and client component. Right now we're going to keep this as a server component. So let's go ahead and save that. And our next step is what we want to do. Let's get rid of this first. What we want to do is we are going to use this REST countries API. And our goal here is we're going to load up all the countries and do something with it. All right, so we're going to use this API endpoint right here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. And over here, what we're going to do is we're going to create an async function that grabs all the countries. If we run into an error, if it is okay, what we're going to want to do, let's save it in a variable here so we can inspect it. Data equals, here we go. And let's make sure it works. So let's go ahead and console.log data. And over here, countries any, we're going to grab countries. So let's go ahead and save it, and let's see if it all works. That's right, awesome. As you can see in our server side, it is actually printing all of the data that we received. So that's great, we know it's working. What we need to do is we need to pass this data to a client component so we can do stuff with it, right? So the next step is we are going to create a client component. So let's go ahead and create a file. And this client component is going to receive, let's clean that up now, countries. For now we'll put any. And for now, And we're going to console.log country, so we know that it is showing up in our client side. And we are going to give the use client directive here. All right, that's done. On our server side, I don't think we need to log this anymore, so let's go ahead and get rid of that. But over here, what I'd like to do is change this. Let's clean this up. And let's put countries, client component. Awesome. And again, it expects countries, right? So we're going to put countries. Make sure that's spelled correctly. And if we go ahead and click save, what you'll notice up here is now it is rendering our countries client component. And we can also access the data about the countries that's been passed. So now we can do some things with this. So our next step is we want to start rendering. So I think what the best move here is we're going to want to create a component that will render each country and then add some actions to it. So let's go to that next. So before we get started though, let's go ahead and get rid of these because we don't need them actually. Just still render properly. Again, the nice thing about this is that we should have access to all the countries already, so it's just nice. So we can kind of anticipate what we want to render. Let's go ahead and create a file called country component.tsx. So this is going to be responsible for rendering each country. And this is going to accept country. And then for the time being, let's go ahead and have it render country.name. I believe we have that here. Okay, we can do country.name.common. Let's do that. Cool. So let's go ahead to our client component here. And let's go ahead and map all of the countries. Okay. Remember, we need to add a key to this, so let's use, we can just use the same thing, I think. We can use country.name.common. So we'll give it the name of the country, and then of course, the component itself is expecting the country. So let's pass it on over. So TypeScript is not mad at us. Let's go ahead and close this up. Let's see if it works. Let's go ahead and save it. As you can see, we have each of our countries showing, which is nice. All right. The next step, let's go ahead and style this just a little bit. Let's give it a class name. We're going to flex this, and then we're also going to allow this to wrap. There it is. So all of our countries are showing. Let's clean up our country component here. CSS. Let's go ahead and give it some margin X of 2 just to see what that looks like. Let's go ahead and give it a border and then a padding X of 2. See what that looks like. Alright, looks better. Let's add a couple more items on here. Let's go margin Y to 1 and then let's round the edges here so it looks a little decent. Do that. This should just give us a chance to look at our countries. Awesome. So now what we have is we have all of our countries rendering, which is what we wanted to accomplish. And then the next thing we want to do is we probably want to do some interactive here where we can filter it possibly. And then also if we click on a country, maybe we wanted to render something else about that country, right? Maybe there's a lot of information about each of the countries. So let's make that happen next. So let's first put filtering functionalities, and where we're going to do that is we are going to do that in the countries client component here. All right, and some changes that we're going to make is we're actually going to leverage the useState hook, visible countries, set visible countries, useState, and we're going to set that to an empty array right now. And the way we're going to do this is we're also going to leverage the use effect hook. And from here, what we want is we want countries to be set to the visible countries, and that's actually what we're going to use to render. All right, so set visible countries, and this use effect is going to update if anything changes with the countries. So maybe there's an update in the search, or there's an update in how we're calling the fetch of the countries. It's going to update what our visible countries are. And then what we want to do is let's add an input that will ask users to search for a country. What we're going to do here, that's a mess right there, right? So what we want to do is let's clean this up. We're going to put that right on top. In fact, what we want to do is we probably want to wrap that in a div. Let's see what that looks like right now, just to see where we're at. Okay, that looks decent. And let's put some class here so it looks clean. There's some space. And let's go ahead and flex this so we can center our input field. All right, so our input field is right in the middle over here. What we want to do is, as the user is typing the name of the country, we want to filter this. We're going to use the onKeyUp event listener, and then we're going to go ahead and pass on, and we're going to go ahead and handle that. So go ahead and handle key up. So we'll write a method for that. We want this to be a keyboard event. Let's make sure we have this right. Let's grab the target. Let's make sure it works. Let's save it. Let's go ahead and type in here hello. There it is. It's working. There's an issue there. It's in white text, so let's go ahead and fix that. There we go. So now that's working. All right, so our next step now then is to implement the actual filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create filter countries, which is going to take in the search text. Since it has all this for us already, let's go ahead and clean this up. Okay, let's go ahead and save it. And over here, countries, we can actually go ahead and console.log filtered countries here so we can see. We can let's get the length instead. So if I type in, let's go Cyprus, you'll see that the length is 1 because there's only 1. If I type Suma for Somalia, SOM, if I just go SO, there are 10, as you can see over here. But you notice nothing's happening in the render because what we need to do is we're still using the countries to map into our country component. What we want is we want to do the visible countries. So now, if I go ahead and click Save, you'll see that the filter is working. Cyprus, Mexico, if it's just ME, grabs everything but ME. Philippines, all works perfect. All right, so our filtering works. Another functionality that we can do is allow the clicking of each of these items, and if we click on a country, maybe an information about that country pops up. So why don't we build that next? All right, so what we want to do here is I'd like to render the country's capital, which is provided to us right here in an array. And then what I also want to do is I would like to render the flag for that country, and we'll use the PNG when we click on a button. As you can see, I added some CSS, so if we hover on it, it shifts a little bit and the color changes so we know which one we're actually clicking on. So let's do that. Why don't we give it a click event, and when they click, it opens up a modal of some sort that then provides us with a flag and the name of the capital for that country. So to make it a little bit easier, let's go ahead and install that Flowbyte React library for our modal. All right, so now that it's installed, let's go ahead and import modal from Flowbyte. Okay, what I know is that we are going to need to leverage useState because Modal will require a Boolean. So let's go ahead and create that now. False, perfect. And then what we want to do is I actually want to create a fragment here. Right below that, we're going to put Modal. Oh, nice. And it looks like it's working okay. And then let's go ahead and put a header on there. And let's just print the country's name. Okay. And what we need is we need an on-click handler here. That will set the modal to show. And that should get us working here. So let's go ahead and click save and see what this looks like. Let's widen this out just a little bit here. Let's try and click on Liberia here. As you can see, it's rendering Liberia. That's nice. Let's try Ivory Coast. That works. Guam. That works. So let's go ahead and add the body here. And what we can do is we can add, let's make this a full div. And alternatively, let's go ahead and say country as our alternative. Let's wrap this and we should be good to go. Let's see what this looks like. Let's click on Venezuela. Check that out, it's working. I did say that we want the capital to also render, so let's go ahead and do that. If there is a capital, let's go to country. Then what we want is to render the capital. And it's an array. Otherwise, we're going to say no capital. Go ahead and pick Greenland. Okay. I'm not seeing it, but it's right over here. Let's go ahead and change the text there. So we can see much better. If we check out another one in Chad, there it is. France works. All right. We have a working app here. We just probably need to make that look a little bit nicer. So I'm going to go ahead and add those CSS, and all of the code should be available for your GitHub. In the meantime, let's go over what we accomplished so far. In the beginning, we created page.tsx, which is a server component, and using its power by doing our fetching of the countries right within the component itself. The nice thing about that is, even though we did it there, it's not accessible. Even if you had some sort of API keys here that were exposed, it actually wouldn't be exposed because it's running on the server side. And then after we grab that data here, we pass it onto our client component. Then our client component receives all the countries. And what we did was we passed it on to visible countries variable, which we are using useState hook for, because we wanted to be able to filter that. We used keyUpEventHandler to grab the search text, and using the search text to filter, and whatever the filtered countries are, we set it back to set visible countries, which is what we then map into rendering through our country component. Our country component took in the country itself, where we rendered a name, and of course we implemented Flowbyte React's modal, where we print out the name of the country, the flag, and then also the capital of that country. So we accomplished quite a bit. I hope you found that helpful, and I hope you start using that in your front-end project. If you do like this video and if you like the content, please hit subscribe. And if you have any ideas on how we can improve this, or if you have videos you'd like to see, please comment below. Thank you and have a good day.